Cowboy Wisdom. And tonight's podcast is 7 reasons why supply side economics is an unrealized swindle. As my freedom is my framework, frames my merit is a mask. I break the broadcast and rise from the task to bask of my son of the fun, energetic liberation. Why media rhetoric, supply side economics, indoctrinated education, and business education is socialism spoke in capitalist rhetoric. Here are 2 innovative, clever ways that it's done. One, it's a centrally planned belief system with private beneficiaries. Public funds and institutions shape the minds of the people to serve the markets and the corporations or whoever is ahead of the chain. Yet the rewards flow upward, never outward or down to the people. That's socialism for the elite, branded as meritocracy for the rest of us. It syndicates obedience across the platform. Media scripts, economic myths, and classroom dogmas all echo the same chant: serve, consume, conform, by calling it freedom, innovation, and success. And if you look at the world today, they all talk about having this and that. And if you look, we follow whatever the business and education systems of the world say. They never talk about us being an autodidact adventure. Autodidact is sovereign, expansion, enlightenment, whatever. And an adventure is we never go outside of the train tracks of life. And I've really opened up to this in my own life. The world sets on train tracks. You got business and education, and they want everybody to fill in to be the railroad ties between it. They never want us to go outside of the lines of the lines of being lines of their teachings. Why supply side economics believe low wages is good for the country and the world. And that's something you ever hear. If you ever hear of people getting raises, they say, oh, that's inflationary. That's the biggest lie there is. But they keep people believing that, so people follow their turdocracy or the BS they spew. Supply side economics treats low wages as a competitive lubrication, a myth that friction fuels growth. By framing suppressed pay as national strength, it sanctifies struggle as efficiency, ignoring that the starving roots, which is the middle class and working class, shrivels the whole tree. Well, when you keep shrinking the wages and you keep tightening up people, pretty soon the tree is going to fall because it has no nourishment from the bottom. And wages are the nourishment of the economy because they filter out. And you look, we've got we've had large corporate profits and business profits, which is good. But pretty soon you keep shutting off to where the bottom is and the people that work for a living, pretty soon that tree's coming down. And we're sitting there. There's a lot happening with that. Supply side economic rhetoric is why supply side economics is a liar's larceny. It rebrands hoarding as heroism. The rich are framed as saviors while they siphon the public wealth. All them tax breaks, everything going, that's taxpayer money. And we think we give it to them, we get it, but how much of it really siphons back to the community? Most of the profits stay there, and they really treat the taxpayers and the citizens in a very disparaging way, if you ask me. It weaponizes aspiration. People are sold dreams of upward mobility while the ladder is quietly removed. to move up the ladder, you got to be inside the clique. And if you ain't in the clique, you know what happens. It hides systematic theft in elegant language. Incentives, growth, freedom become euphemisms for the extraction, deregulation, and equality. Look how the world has come since we deregulated everything, and we've given we deregulated everything, tax breaks, and all this. Has the world risen from to the way it was before 1984 when supply side economics started? So let's strip away supply side economics to its energetic bones and decode the spell it casts. Why supply side rhetoric is the polished language used to justify policies that prioritize producers, especially wealthy investors and corporations, under the claim that their success will trickle down to everyone else. It's never just economics. It's a story, a seduction, a systematic chance, and the core spell components. Grow the pie is the illusion it claims by cutting taxes and regulations for the wealthy. The economy expands for all, but that pie doesn't grow. It gets sliced to favor the few. If you really look at over since, especially the last 10 years, it just keeps growing up and up and up. But yet, if you look at what's the country, supply side economics has got a lot to do with the national debt, which is all fake and bake anyway. Job creators miss. It casts the wealthy as benevolent Indians of opportunity, ignoring how they often hoard profits, automate labor, and offshore the jobs. Have we seen that, especially in the 90s when NAFTA and GATT came in? See, we get sold a book of bullshit, and then we buy it. And then we think, oh my God, we got to be, the biggest lie to me was, we got to be competitive. Well, when you're making $30 or $25 an hour and they outsource your job to some place that makes 25 cents an hour, to me, that's a $24.75 deficit. But the college education and business college education deficits are good as long as it favors business. Trickle down enchantment. It promises that wealth will entirely reach the bottom, but in practice, it pulls at the top. Evaporating before trickles ever happens. It becomes a fickle trickle, and it tickles the higher end of the country. I'd rather be beat than lied to, and so far, supply side economics is a flat out lie. Supply side rhetoric is ritual obedience, never abundance. It's a chant that hypnotizes the masses into believing that their sacrifice fuels collective prosperity, when in veracity, it feeds the elite. So if you notice that the profits stay up high and very seldom come down, and you never see a corporation or anything build anything anywhere without having their hand out for tax breaks. And that tax break money is taxpayer money, but they think anything that goes into the higher echelon thinks anything that goes into the government is their money. And with a campaign contribution, that may just happen. Here's a breath script to dissolve the trance. Trickle is a fiction. Growth is disguised as incentive and is theft in sovereign eyes. Basically, how is supply side economics socialism? That's coming up. Here are some examples of supply side rhetoric. Here's some clever key points about it. Tax cuts spur innovation. Translation, let billionaires keep more of their money. They might invest where public schools rose and healthcare starved. Where do you see that today? I'm for the corporations and everybody making a lot of money. But when they take it and then they outsource it or do something, but they're never looking to take care of the middle class people. In fact, free trade has done a lot of supply side economics, and free trade have done a lot to diminish the quality of life for the middle class. I don't care what anybody says. I can put it in a college educated book, put it out there, get a college professor to spew it, and people will believe it. And the fun one is let the market decide, but when the market doesn't do good enough, first thing they say, they're sitting in front of Congress, like all the car companies did, getting loans. Oh, by the way, all that loan money they get loaned, that's taxpayer money. But when money goes to Washington, D.C., everybody forgets it's taxpayers' money. And, if you look at the world, there's a lot of challenges happening out there because we forget the world is people. It's a people business. And, when you make the laws and you get elected by the electorate, they forget the electorate because they hobnob with them lobbyists. And them lobbyists, all they care about is a dollar bill. And when money takes over your mindset, you've lost your own internal integrity. And trust me, I've lost my internal integrity several times. And remove protections, and this is one of their big ones. Let the market decide. Remove protections, unleash profit predators, and call it freedom, while communities absorb the fallout through tax breaks. They build the stage, but they're never in the play or own the play, or never in the play. Why supply side economics will keep the world silently stuck in poverty and scarcity with an extreme separation of wealth. Supply side economics sanctifies hoarding as growth. By funneling resources upwards through tax cuts and deregulation, it treats wealth concentration as a virtue while starving the roots. That is a silent architecture of scarcity where abundance is gated and poverty is normalized as incentive. Where do you witness that today in the world? When I read this and I wrote this, it really made sense to me. Where silent architects scared of scarcity, where abundance is graded, poverty is normalized as incentive. You take it. How many times have you been on a job? You take a pay cut, we'll get more business. Well, you take the pay cut, and business stays the same. I was working in a place in Wyoming in the early 1980s. They said, "You guys take a pay cut, you will get more business." Next day, they bought 12 brand new Kenworths. That kind of, I went, huh? But it was good for them, and that's their money. It has nothing to do with me. It was just kind of funny the way that turned out. Why the middle class of the United States is the bankers of the world that feeds the supply side economic swindle. Here are some ingenious insights that unveil how the middle class unknowingly bankrolls the supply side swindle. They fund the illusion through tax breaks. While the middle class funds the illusion through tax breath is a life force extracted from the middle class workers' earnings and pays taxes, yet these funds are routed to subsidize the elite's interest. Tax breaks, corporate bailouts, tax loopholes, and wealth hoarding policies are the daily grind that fuels a system that sells scarcity while feeding access to yourself. What's the difference between now and the kings back in the Middle Ages and the czars? We still do the same thing. It isn't, it's going on, but it's up to us to understand We can play this game too, but it's us understanding the economic conditions and the economic rhetoric and the flow. My breath is not your budget. My sweat is not your scheme. I exhale truth and exit the dream. As the middle class labor is taxed to subsidize the elite's gains, making them the silent financiers of trickle up economics. As they build the stage but never own the play, their consumption props up their markets and their debt props up their profits, yet they're cast as extras in an economy they bankroll. That's us. We bankroll the economy. And wages, if we actually raised wages, wages flow up, profits stay at the top. And you can't blame them for keeping their profits. That's just business. But however, keep taking from the middle class and the hourly workers, because right around 64% of people's wages are around that go into is taxes. I'm never your bank. I'm not your base. I unveil my breath and exit your race. And see, that's the thing. We got to get out of their race and not bad. Don't get me wrong. But consumerism and always having to buy stuff, that is the way it is. But we exit their race and open up our own way of life. Explain they build the stage but never own the play. Their consumption props up their markets. Their debt props up profits, yet they're cast as extras in the economy they bankroll. That's us. As they build the stage but never own the play. This means that the middle class constructs the entire infrastructure of the economy through labor, taxes, and spending, cultural participation, but they never control the narrative, the rewards, or the direction. They're the carpenters of capitalism. We're the carpenters of capitalism, yet denied the authorship and the ownership of our own stuff. Our consumption props up markets. The middle class spending is the heartbeat of demand. They buy homes, groceries, cars, education, fueling industries and GDP. Without our daily transactions, the market collapse. Yet they're told they must wait for the wealth to trickle down as their debt props up profits. Through credit cards, mortgages, student loans, these are engineered dependencies. Banks and corporations profit from interest, fees, and social financial stress. The middle class becomes a perpetual revenue stream, never a stakeholder. Yet they're cast as extras in an economy they bankroll. And see, that's the thing. We've been bankrolling holy thing. Look how much we bankrolled in Ukraine. Something people have to open up to. War is big business. Probably the biggest business in the world with the most profit but it's the one that's the most liability to us. Whenever the pragmatists, the policies, the media, and the corporate strategies rarely center their needs. Their background characters used for optics, tax for funding, blame for deficits, and excluded from decision making. That's the middle class. I built the stage, I lit the flame, I write the lines, and I claim the name. Why supply side economics is enhanced through media manipulation. Here's 2 wise, innovative key points. 1, it scripts prosperity as a spectacle. The media glorifies wealth accumulation as virtue, masking the systematic extraction behind success stories and stock market theatrics. It programs obedience through repetition. Buzzwords like job creators, growth, and freedom are looped until they become the gospel, distracting the deficits and disparities supply side policies produce. Where do you see that in the world today? I see that all over. And when this makes sense, they say, well, they're the job creators. Well, when they move overseas, whose jobs are they creating? They may create the jobs, but the taxpayer funds it through tax breaks. See, it's never a 50-50 deal. The more I understand and open up to tax breaks, understanding that's taxpayer money, and they're trying to get a tax break for what's not theirs. You know, the idea that wealth trickles down is a myth. What trickles down is control, never abundance. How does supply side rhetoric influence public policy? Here's two clever key points. One, it rewrites scarcity as strategy by glorifying tax cuts and deregulation. It convinces lawmakers to defund the public while calling it fiscal responsibility. It cloaks elite agendas in populist language. Policies that benefit the wealthy are sold as boosts for small business or job creation, masking systematic upward siphoning. Do you see that when they say, oh, small business, but yet small businesses are struggling? It seems like it trickles up to the corporations and their taxpayer and their money they give for elections. Why supply side economics invokes a third world enslaving mindsets controlling the world through tyranny. Here are three keen insights that slice through the tyranny coded mindsets of supply side economics. It exports scarcity as strategy by hoarding capital and privatizing abundance. It manufactures lack and then sells aid as control. It disguises extraction as empowerment. Tax cuts for the elite masquerade as growth, while global labor is cheapened into servitude for profit margins. Where do you see that today? I can see that. I see that happening every day. It colonizes policy through economic dogmas. The supply side logic becomes a gospel installed in institutions enforced through debt and worshipped as freedom. Why supply side economic is a blatant swindle to the middle class taxpayer of the United States. I express these innovative key points to you. One, it privatizes the gains and socializes the cost. Where do you see that? Tax breaks, who gets the profits? Tax cuts for the wealthy are sold as growth, but middle class taxpayers foot the bill. The middle class taxpayers foot the bill. That's something I want people to understand. The taxpayers foot the bill through crumbling infrastructure, rising debt, and gutted public services. Where do you see that today? It's all over. It's a trickle-down troll booth. The wealthy speed ahead on the tax-free expressways, while the middle class repeats the tolls through wage stagnation, inflation, and economic precarity. Is that pretty much what's happening today? Yes. Why supply side economics are tax cuts for the extremely wealthy and tax increases for the middle class. The biggest tax increase in the world is when we get a tax cut, the percentages, they close loopholes on the working class. That's something you want to watch for. It shifts the burden. Tax cuts shift the burden with a velvet glove. While the wealthy gets cuts wrapped in growth rhetoric, the middle class inherits a bill through stealth taxes, closing the loopholes, reduced services, and inflated costs. It's a reverse Robin Hood ritual. Supply side logic robs the many to reward the few, dressed up as economic liberation. It's actually fiscal obedience in disguise. Why tax cuts are some of the largest tax increases in history. Here's some key points. Tax cuts is a mirage followed by a tidal wave of hikes, and that's the hikes they close loopholes. When we did the tax cuts in the 1980s, the tax cut slashed revenue by 2.9% of GDP. Mounting the deficits triggered a series of revenue enhancements that reversed nearly half of it. What are revenue enhancements? Revenue enhancement is a euphemism often used by governments to describe increase in tax revenue, typically through raising taxing, reducing deductions. That's the one they do. Or closing loopholes. That's the one they do. It's a phrase that sounds like growth, but often signals greater financial burden on the taxpayers, especially the middle class. And the private sector refers to strategy for boosting income, like optimizing prices, expanding markets, or increasing customer retention. But in the public sphere, it's often a polished term for fiscal extraction by other things. Here's a sovereign reframe. Revenue enhancement is the velvet glove over tax hikes, a tax hike fist, soft in sound, firm in impact. The middle class paid for the top end's feast. As the wealthy rode the initial cuts, as the 1980 tax cuts later become tax hikes, especially in 1982 and beyond, shifting the burden to payroll tax, excise tax, and reduced deductions, hitting everyday earners the hardest. Why supply-side economics are illusions of prosperity for all. It opened up a fresh foresight to me. It paints abundance with invisible ink. The promise of prosperity for all vanishes on contact. Only the elite see the glow while the rest chase the shadows. It sells the ladder yet removes the rung so everybody can climb zero higher. Supply-side economics, upward mobility yet rigs the system so the most climb in place while the wealth ascends untouched. And why supply-side rhetoric offers upward mobility yet rigs the system so most climb in place while the wealth ascends untouched. That exposes the rigged climb yet below the supply-side economics. Supply-side logic glorifies effort, ambition, shields elite capital from contribution, accountability, or redistribution. Why supply-side economics egotistically think taxpayer money is their money. It confuses privilege with entitlement. The wealthy treat the public revenue as personal refunds, believing that success justifies reclaiming what was theirs, and rewrites contribution as ownership. By paying more in taxes, the elites assume control, mistaking civic duty for shareholder stake in democracy. And we're not a democracy. The United States is a representative republic. And I want to thank you. I am Robert A. Wilson, and may your life be as blessed as you're a blessing to me in the world.